Tonight, a Central Florida family is looking for answers as they say their son was run over by a police cruiser. We'll look deep in depth on the story and find out exactly what attorney Ben Crump says could have happened. Plus, all eyes are on Washington right now as everybody is wondering what's going to happen with the debt ceiling. Will the government stay open and will we get to pay our bills? We've got the latest on the developments in D.C. And the UN is out with a report that says global warming is caused by humans. We'll talk with Casanova Nurse to see exactly if global warming is caused by us and what we can do to reverse the carbon footprint. You're just in time. The News on Bounce starts right now.
You're watching Bounce TV News at 7.
My message to Congress is this: do not shut down the government, do not shut down the economy, pass a budget on time, pay our bills on time. Refocus on the everyday concerns of the American people. There'll be areas where we can work together, there'll be areas where we disagree. But do not threaten to burn the house down simply because you haven't gotten 100% of your way.
Good evening, I'm Rockman Johnson. You're inside the News on Bounce. That was President Barack Obama from a press conference earlier today when he was trying to deal with the crisis that's coming down in Washington. It's 3 days and counting to a possible government shutdown, and the debt ceiling debate remains on the horizon. Jim Acosta in Washington has the latest right now.
3 days and counting, and there is no compromise in sight that could avert a government shutdown. And right behind that September 30th shutdown deadline, the nation could go into default roughly 2 weeks later, unless Congress raises the debt ceiling. Despite warnings from economists of a disaster, Republicans say they'll approve an increase in the debt limit only if the president agrees to their demands, like delaying Obamacare by a year and more budget cuts. But President Obama says he won't negotiate over the debt ceiling.
To suggest America not pay its bills just to try to blackmail a president into giving them some concessions on issues that have nothing to do with the budget. I mean, this is the United States of America. We're not a deadbeat nation.
The White House is ratcheting up the rhetoric, accusing some Republicans of acting like terrorists.
We are for cutting spending. We're for reforming our tax code. We're for reforming our entitlements. What we're not for is negotiating with people who have a bomb strapped to their chest.
American people, this is the GOP. We have your economy.
The Democratic Party is echoing that message, releasing this fake debt ceiling ransom call from the GOP.
Clock's ticking. We hope you don't make us do this.
Republicans say that kind of talk is an outrage.
It's completely unrealistic for the president to say that we're not going to negotiate over the debt ceiling, that he thinks somehow that we should be just giving him another blank check to continue these record deficits.
GOP leaders point to new polls showing Americans want the president to negotiate, trading budget cuts for an increase to the debt ceiling.
The president says, I'm not going to negotiate. Well, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way.
We call on the president now to sit down with us, Harry Reid, to sit down with us and let's solve the problem.
Jim Acosta, CNN, the White House.
As the White House tries to deal with this crisis in Washington, Bill Dindy is standing by. He's a certified financial planner and public accountant. Bill, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And now the question is, as the country gets ready to maybe shut down, last night we talked about 5 things that people would see or not see. How will we know? What will be the difference that the normal American would see if the government doesn't come to a deal in the next few days?
Well, I remember back in 1995 when we had one of our first shutdowns, my mother was traveling to Yellowstone National Park. And when she got there, the park was totally shut down, and she planned this vacation for a year or 2 in advance. And she called me up and said, your government shut down my park. So that was the first indication that something was not quite right. And, you know, it's going to be in those what they call non-essential or non-timely or time-based services like the national monuments, the national parks, things that we won't see at first. So a lot of folks won't notice a difference right away, unless, of course, you're one of the government employees who are affected by this furlough.
What does it take? I mean, right now we know the Senate is in Democratic hands. We know that the House is in Republican hands, and the president's going to veto anything else that comes through. But what is it going to take for these two sides to get together and say, here's what we should do. You're a financial planner. You know you really aren't supposed to spend more than you take in. What do they need to do in your estimation?
Well, it's interesting that we had this concept of a debt ceiling, which came out in 1917 after the war, and the 14th Amendment kind of gives the president the right to pay the bills regardless of this debt ceiling, but you know Obama's not going to do that. It's it's an interesting thing because the Republicans don't want to be seen as the bad guys to cause this problem, as we just saw. So I think right now there's political pressure, the pressure that the people put on the government to do the right thing. And I think that we're finally starting to see that effect because neither side is willing to work together, but neither side wants a shutdown, so they're going to have to come together. And I think this is exactly the type of thing that we need to have, that we're not going to tolerate another shutdown. And with that, we'll get some major spending cuts because this debt ceiling, that's not where you solve the problem. You solve the problem in the budget.
And spending with those cuts. And I have to ask you one last question. We only have seconds left. Debt ceiling, do we need to raise it? Yes or no?
Debt ceiling is kind of an interesting concept because there are people who believe we don't need a debt ceiling. It's ridiculous to have one. Unfortunately, if we don't have something to stop the increased spending, we're going to get to a point where we won't be able to pay our debts. And we're seeing the United States being downgraded by Standard & Poor's. And the question of can we continue to hedge our payments and the debts? We can't. So it becomes a concern that we need to change the way things are done in Washington now.
Bill Dindy joining us from Dallas. Thanks so much. And you have to come back. There's so much more to discuss on this issue. Thanks, Bill.
God bless you. Have a good one.
You as well. Now, Congress will also be debating the debt ceiling for the next week. We'll keep you up on all the behind the scenes on our website, bouncenews.tv. Well, tonight, the family of Marlon Brown has reached out to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Medical Examiners Commission for an independent review into Marlon's death. They say that the examiners helped to cover up his killing, and that's what they're calling it. Now, the family wants another investigation into Brown's death because they believe that the officer that hit Brown needs to be held accountable. Dr. Shipping Bao, the medical examiner who conducted Brown's autopsy, said that Brown died from medical asphyxia. But a dash cam video released earlier in the week clearly shows Officer James Harris hitting Brown with the vehicle. Now, Bao said that he declared Brown's death was an accident, saying the weight of the car that was on top of him cut his oxygen off. You got to remember, this is the same medical examiner that did the autopsy for Florida teen Trayvon Martin. Bao was fired September 6th.
I do not have any memory of the day of autopsy. All I hear is the notes I have. Okay.
Let me be sure I understand.
Without notes, I cannot tell you any fact.
Now, that was part of Bao's testimony from the Trayvon Martin trial. He, again, said that he couldn't give any other details without the notes. Now, there was a letter that was released this morning through attorney Benjamin Crump. It was from the family of Brown, saying that the medical examiners neglected to pay attention to obvious evidence. Brown's ex-wife says the logic behind the cause of death defies common sense. The letter says that Brown slipped and fell, and the police car came to rest on top of him, that there's no evidence that he was struck by the vehicle. The report also says that there was no trauma to Brown's neck, and the report goes on to say Brown's neck was bent to his chest. Now, we'll be looking closely into this story, and of course, attorney Benjamin Crump has released that letter, and he is representing the family. You'll remember he was also the attorney of record for the family of Trayvon Martin. We'll be right back. Breast Cancer Awareness Month is almost here, and we've got a patch of pink pumpkins on the way. That's in Say It Posted. But first, one Florida mother is outraged after a letter called her 11-year-old daughter overweight. The mom says her kids eat healthy, and she's just flat out confused.
Lily is tall, she's athletic, she's solid muscle, but by no means is she overweight.
And she's hoping she can help inspire other parents to keep their children on the straight and narrow so that they can love the bodies that they're in. We've got the latest on bouncenews.tv right now. Come on, read with me.